Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Kim Frolander is the founder and president of Ruth Israel Initiative based in Birmingham, Alabama, a nonprofit committed to reconciling the ancient rift between Christians and Jews through education and trips for Christians to introduce them to the people and the land of Israel. She spent 2 very formative years living and working as a volunteer in Jerusalem. Upon moving back to the United States, Kim wrote instructional books and developed a small group curriculum for Christians to get a better understanding of the relationship God desires to build between the Christian church and the Jewish people. Now she's added time organizing groups to visit the Holy Land through unique and specialized trips for microgroups as small as 6 and up to small teams of 25. She's a part of the Vineyard movement and serves as the administrator and communications coordinator for Vineyard USA's Well-Being of Pastors initiative. She loves to see pastors' hearts come alive with fresh vision and passion when they connect to the grand, unfolding story of God's writing in the earth with Israel and the church together as one. She's a prolific author, having published over 5 fiction and 5 nonfiction books. You can find more about her at ruthisrael.org. Here to host this edition of Embracing Israel, seen the second Friday of every month in the 10 o'clock hour, and to talk about all things Israel is Kim Frolander. Kim, welcome to your edition of Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi Walker. It's good to be with you again and see your face.
Good to see your face. And how are you surviving? You've had your own personal encounter with COVID-19.
Yes, well, lots of sleep and herbs and more sleep. Just, pushing through, but doing okay. The symptoms kind of go up and down, but doing okay for the most part.
So have you found in the medical community you were tested positive for COVID-19?
No, I did not go out. 2 of my sisters did right after they were at my house. And so I'm just assuming and not putting the strain on the system to go out, and really didn't want to wait in the line either.
So self-quarantine because of
Yes.
exposure. And in that 14-day window and seeing what the symptoms are like. Maybe you can share with the audience just a little bit of what it's navigating. We've never had a guest on who's tested positive or exposed to family members. So you're really kind of bringing us a unique perspective on this. And I know it's a little bit off the topic of embracing Israel,
yes.
But Israel's embracing COVID-19 as America is embracing COVID-19, and to try to understand from a firsthand experience of what it's like to be exposed to it and feeling some of the symptoms and trying to navigate through self-quarantine and balancing out the physical with the emotional, with the spiritual, knowing that you probably represent the greater percentage of what we would consider to be the COVID-19 population. That's what have not been tested, have not been diagnosed, but have been exposed to someone in the family unit that has, and you have 2 sisters and a nephew, all who tested positive. So the high likelihood is that you would be positive for the antigen, but you took certain steps in order to mitigate some of the symptoms. What did you do?
Well, first, to start out with, I've never had the flu, like ever. So I didn't really have a comparison, like most people say, well, it's like the flu. Well, I don't have that to compare to. So I can just kind of go through what it felt like. First off, we went about 11 to 12 days into everything, into our self-quarantine before I felt anything. I have a pretty strong immune system, and I take care of it. Probiotics, healthy foods, exercise, good sleep, all of those things contribute to a healthy immune system. So I started out high. So about day 10 or 11, normally I fast on Mondays, and I've been having a little trouble doing that during all of the emotional crisis of trying to just live in America in the last 3 months. But I had this surge in my spirit that said, it's time to just discipline yourself and get back to fasting. Well, I don't normally eat sugar either. And I had kind of slipped back into that. So Monday this week, I fasted. And by the end of the day and the beginning of Tuesday, I had this raging headache. Um, and I put it down to the sugar detox because that's exactly what that feels. Your joints start to ache and you get this headache, like right in here. And that's exactly what it felt like. And so I just kind of took it easy, didn't add sugar back to my diet because once you get past that hump, you're okay. And your body quits craving the sugar and sending you those false symptoms. Well, it was not getting any better. And so that evening, I did go ahead and have some quinine, some tonic water, because they said that kind of helps. And I immediately felt better. I was like, oh, okay, well, we can control it with this. Well, it lasted for a little while. And then the next day, I did continue with the tonic water and the other home remedy things. And you can actually see the symptoms subside. And then when those things work their way out of your system, the symptoms come back up. So it's very interesting. I'm not one who normally takes any kind of medicine, such as Tylenol or Advil. I don't use it, not because I'm against it. I just don't usually. I want to go to the root of the problem, which is generally going to be dehydration or something like that. And 2 days in a row, I had to take some Tylenol. So I was like, oh, there's something wrong. And so I'm still coming into the idea that this probably is COVID, with very light symptoms. Like I have not lost a sense of smell. I've got this really fancy hand soap that I smell every morning just to check, and I can still smell my coffee. The headache comes and goes. I haven't had any congestion or tightness in my chest, though. So you can see kind of why it could be, but maybe not. So just really dealing with symptoms in the physical, and I guess spiritually, just being at rest. The Lord's got this. I'm not afraid of it. We've talked before, I hate fear, and I'm not going to let it get in any form. And so just, resting in the Lord, taking that time off. I am a type A, and so, accomplishing things is paramount to me. And so coming away from that and being okay with that and, resting in the Lord's love for me to do nothing, to just rest, to be with Him. That's pretty much where I'm at.
So this is probably the I don't want to say the average person's experience, but it seems to be that people have similar reports to those feelings, maybe a little bit of extra tiredness. One of the things that in Israel, of course, a Middle Eastern diet is different than the American diet. And so yes. I've adopted for many years now an Israeli diet because that's where I thrived. I physically thrived in Israel. So my day begins with things like figs, things that I would normally eat in Israel, and the rest of my diet throughout the day and into the evening is more based on that. And I'm significantly older. I've never had the flu, but I find that the diet helps. The regimen helps. And so I don't know if I've been exposed. I wear if I go out in public, which is not that much, I do wear a mask, just because I'm in that high risk just because of age, not because of any compounding other issues. But it's kind of like, why test? Why try? Why push? Other people are pushing back. I don't know that it should be mandatory, but I do believe that if I can do things to protect myself, that I will. That's just wisdom, that you don't go out. I'm at Walmart at 6 o'clock in the morning with 12 other people.
Yeah.
And actually Sunday mornings, which is at 6 o'clock in the morning, there might be 5 people there at 6 o'clock. And so, you just do things smart. And, actually that is a reflection on our trips to Israel, your trips and my trips, is that we use wisdom. We weigh and evaluate each situation on a daily basis by communicating with different contacts throughout the land to make sure that the places that we're going to are open, that there is no issue going on, especially in regards to the Temple Mount, especially in regards to the southern steps. There's things in Jerusalem that you, depending on, and typically we travel during Ramadan. That's just the window, and that happens to fall between Passover and Pentecost. And I'm not I don't take trips to Israel during the feast because things aren't open. And we're not taking people there to experience Israel from a Jewish observant perspective. We're taking them there to see where Jesus walked and the places. And so a lot of that is not available during the feast days. So you can attend conferences for the Feast of Tabernacles and celebrations, but it's a different kind of experience. And being Jewish, it's very, very familiar to me. I'd be very, very comfortable doing it, but I don't know that 53 Christians traveling with me would really want to spend time either in the synagogue or meeting in regards to the traditions of the Jewish feast days, even though it's available.
And if they want something like that, there are trips that are specifically for that.
Correct.
And they can take that. You and I just have a different culture that we put together on our trips.
Exactly. So as we're talking about this preparation, and what you talked about was the first thing you thought about was dehydration.
Yes.
That's a natural for you and I. That's the go-to because of so much time in the land and so much experience with people with dehydration. And the word for what we say is schluck, drink. So we tell people that if you say, well, I'm not drinking because I'm not thirsty, if you get thirsty, it's too
You're
late.
Way too late.
It's too late. We're going to take you to the hospital. They're going to hang 3 saline bags. You'll be fresh as you can be the next morning. But the time in between are those headaches and that lethargy that comes with it. And then there's nausea and other symptoms. And we tend to take a little bit older group of people, and that's something you don't want to experience. But as we talk about...
Definitely not the cultural experience you're going for.
Exactly. And even the guides will tell you that if you haven't had 3 bottles of water by now, you're not drinking enough. If you haven't had 5 bottles of water by now, you're not drinking enough. So as we talk...
And I noticed that most people are worried about the bathroom.
Yes.
It's, well, I don't want to overdrink because I don't want to be a trouble to the group. But that's not their responsibility. The guide and your team leader, that is on their plate. They're the ones that make sure that you've got enough bathroom opportunities and all of that. So just give faith and trust in your leader to provide what you need, the same way that you do with the Father, accept that he has got this and that there will be a bathroom for you. Please drink.
Well, we have a motto in Israel, and that's coffee in, coffee out.
Hmm.
So we make stops along the way. One of the things that is always challenging is that ladies' room lines are always longer than men's room lines. So you say, well, here you're talking about embracing Israel, and all of a sudden you're in potty talk. And why is potty talk such an important part of this experience? Well, because on your trips, you're writing, you're drinking, and you are processing. And we build in time, knowing, and we actually embrace that if there's nobody in the men's room, use the men's room. Don't allow yourself to be restricted by things you wouldn't do in America
Exactly.
because you're concerned that these are usually 1 and 2 stall facilities, and it's something that's realistic. So when we tell you to avail yourself of the facilities, we want you to avail yourself of the facilities, even if you don't think you have to go. When you lead, we expect you to follow, and that's part of the surrender. And in the preparation that you give and the preparation I give is surrendering to those that understand. I had a recent experience, and I'll share this with you, to try to give our audience an understanding that if you're going to go to Israel, there is a cultural difference. I had someone who inquired very personally about a particular personal detail about someone very, very close to me in Israel. And they were asking for a piece of information. And my response was, out of respect for my relationship with this person, for that reason and for many other reasons, which I hope I will not have to enumerate, I don't share anything personal about anyone who I am associated with in Israel. I hope you can accept this as an answer without needing any more justification. Now, that's not the normal response. If somebody asks me, hey, how's Kim Frolander doing? I might say, hey, just saw her on the program 2 weeks ago. She's doing great. A little bit of COVID-19, but she's doing fine. I wouldn't hesitate to give that kind of response here. But there's every person that we deal with in Israel has been or is in the IDF.
Yeah.
Every person we deal with in Israel has another aspect to their life in a Middle Eastern country in dealing with where they live, in the community, whether or not they're believers, not believers, whether or not they have children. You'll find that in the postings that you see on Facebook from people in Israel, they are a little bit framed a little bit differently. Their location not always given. You don't see a lot of pictures being posted of police and military personnel and things like that. It's a different cultural mindset as to respecting the privacy and the fact that they may be exposed to somebody who does not have their best interest at heart. And sharing information about them is not culturally the mindset of the Middle East. It's the American mindset where, not that Israel's not a social society, but Israel's under constant attack. Now, that doesn't mean it's not safe to travel there. There's cyber attacks. There's all kinds of things going on that don't make the news. And most people aren't paying any attention to the news out of Israel anyways. They're so consumed with whose life matters and the issues of the day here in America, and Donald Trump's hair, and those kind of things.
Such important things,
Of course. But there are multiple levels of spiritual warfare going on, and multiple levels of personal exposure. So you don't see a lot of the same kind of public postings coming out of the Israeli friends as you do with your American friends, who will show you everything they do, where they are on vacation, what they're doing with their families, all of that. It's a different cultural environment. So in understanding that and preparing people to understand questions about people's military experience, or whether or not they've had, there's Mossad, there's the Shin Bet, there's other, and people have multiple aspects of their life, maybe in tourism, but they're also in other areas via tourism, which is a gateway to understand that you're hearing what other groups are talking about, you're meeting people from other nations, you're exposed to other leaders, you're tapped into the really the telephone game between guides of both Arab descent, Palestinian descent, Christian descent, Jewish descent, and sharing information back and forth, which is not for public consumption. And so there's a whole network that people aren't familiar with, and when you try to explain to them the privacy of the Middle East and explain politics to them, it's kind of different because they have a Western outlook on it, and it's hard for them to understand. So this person was a professional and was kind enough not to respond probatively to asking for more information as to why I didn't feel I could share. I just have a policy that I don't share anything. That if you want to contact this person and you have a question for them, then feel free to do so if you have their contact information. If not, then there's probably a reason why you don't have their contact information.
Exactly. And don't ask for it if you're not offered it.
Right.
Yeah. So I have noticed that to a smaller degree, probably. I don't have as many contacts built up as you do yet. And I have noticed, though, if I give my teams an opportunity and they're wondering about something like that, can I post this? Can we take a picture together? Something like that. I would ask them to err on the side of asking first. They're not going to be offended by a question. That's what guides do. And so I would rather them ask the question and be turned down and take a little. Americans don't like to be told no. It's just who we are. But to take that on and say, you know what, I'll ask.
So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back and rejoin Kim Frolander for this edition of Revealing the Truth, Embracing Israel. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zeb Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black, and Sean Tabbitt for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, the brain, spiritual warfare, overcoming shame, mysteries of the Bible, prophetic insights, the sensational and the supernatural, caregiving, addiction recovery, understanding the divided heart, same-sex attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitinganation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitinganation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Kim Frolander, author of Israel 1, Israel Basics, Israel 2, Beyond the Basics, Spiritual Journey Through Israel, and a number of fiction and nonfiction books about Israel. You can find more about her at ruthisrael.org. Kim, welcome back to your edition of Embracing Israel, seen right here on the second Friday of every month at the 10 o'clock Central Time hour to talk about all things Israel.
It is absolutely my pleasure.
So, Kim, we touched on a couple of things. One was cultural, that, you know, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. Things
Yeah.
that are done in Israel are in the Middle East, and we actually go to Jordan, so we have other Middle Eastern encounters. We've got,
Yes.
I've got a friend that's taking a trip where they're starting out in Egypt and working their way up from
Nice.
Egypt, from the pyramids,
Oh,
all the
okay.
way, all
Following
the way,
Jesus' path.
right,
Nice.
following it all the way back up, coming up through Petra, come across the Red Sea and into Petra, and then into Eilat, and then coming up through the Negev. And,
Oh, wow. That would be spectacular.
yeah, and so that's a 2-week trip. We have an 11-day trip. I'm sorry, 13-day trip in May, which has the Petra add-on to it.
Okay.
So 10 days in the north and then 4 days in the south. So that we'll get to Petra, we'll be able to cruise on the Red Sea, go snorkeling, and that's very, very exciting. But as people prepare, and let's talk about this for a moment. We have a trip coming up in next May. This is
Right.
this is July, so I have a countdown app. Let me check my countdown app, and I can tell you. And I do this on a regular basis. So it's in 10 months, 1 week, and 3 days, we'll be departing for Israel. Okay, and so I have a little countdown app with a picture of Jerusalem on it, and every now and then I'll post a screenshot to say, usually to mark the month in countdown, because I'm trying to get people prepared. And if you do this right, preparation begins long in advance of packing, which is in that 3 to 4 week before your trip. You start thinking about what you're going to take, even though we publish our packing list with our information pack. So what are some of the things I should be thinking about in anticipation for a long haul trip with multiple stops along the way? There is no non-stop here in the South anymore.
Right.
Atlanta, there what used to be a Delta flight, but that was canceled many years ago. And
that was a great one. I only got to take it once, but man, it was nice.
And El Al's nonstops are out of New York. So you have to get to either New York or do what we do, which is get to Birmingham to Atlanta, Atlanta to Frankfurt, or to Amsterdam, or to Paris, and change planes there. But that requires some layover time. And
It
that
does.
means the trip there is you leave here. Well, we leave Birmingham at 9 o'clock in the morning. We don't arrive in Israel until 7 o'clock the next night. So it's a 24 to 30 hour jaunt to get there and to get back. And people don't really realize that. What do I need to do now as I'm thinking about that? Because there's a lot of walking, there's a lot of preparation needs to go into it to get physically able to endure those kind of things, jet lag, sleeping on the plane, those kind of things.
There's so much people can do to get themselves ready. First of all, a 30-hour flight is a mindset. It's like a marathon. You've got to get your head in the game, and you've got to come into it well rested. In my opinion, a lot of people will say, go ahead and scoot over to the next time zone before you leave home. To me, that just kind of wastes my days ahead of time, and I just start the fog earlier. So I just stay where I'm at while I'm there, and sleep as much as I can on the flights. I've got a nice little pillow, the little blow-up kind, and I recommend everybody have a pillow, like some sort of pillow besides the one they provide, because those really are worthless. And sleep as much as you can. And one of the things, I've done a lot of international travel besides just to Israel. And one of the things that I've trained my teams with is that if you can just relax your body, and I'm not sure where I heard this statistic, but you're closing your eyes, your whole body is just relaxed. Even if you're not unconscious, you're still getting 70% of the restorative quality to that rest. Like if you were conked out, you'd get 100%, but you get 70% value if you'll just be still, relax, get those noise canceling headphones if you can. If it helps you to sleep with noise, go ahead and flip on the movie or music. Or like last month, we were talking about the scripture that they read to you on app. Download some of that stuff so you can take it with you and listen to it. I don't want to advocate use the Bible to put you to sleep, but if it works to get you ready, go for it. Or get yourself used to the sound in a particular set of music that will help you relax, and practice with it at home so it's not new and you're not processing new information on the plane when you're actually wanting to sleep. And getting the proper exercise before you go. That is such a helpful thing so that your body is used to burning at a certain level. Does that make sense? So you're exercising to prepare your body for all the walking you're going to do. And one thing that has surprised some of my teams is the scripture that says, as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. It's not just a beautiful piece of poetry. There's actually mountains. So when you're walk practicing, please practice with hills. Or, if you're on a treadmill, bump up so you're going at an angle. Get that practice in so that that's not an additional strain on your system. Now, obviously, while you're in the plane, you're not going to be able to walk, especially with current regulations. They want you to sit still and keep your mask on and be quiet. So as you get up and move to the bathroom, which you will be able to do as much stretching as you can. Your legs, when you're sitting and sitting and sitting, they start to pull in and those tendons get tight. And if you can stretch your calves, your quads, front and back of every muscle group in your legs, there's things online. You can just Google stretching, leg stretches, and learn some of those things that will help you, that you can do actually on the plane and once you get to your layover. You do not want to just sit. What you're going to want to do is just sit like this because you're going to feel tired. But if you will walk, and in a group, it's so nice because you can take turns walking and leave your bag if you want to with a friend. If you're traveling alone, like most of the time I do, just drag it along behind you. Make sure you've got that kind of carry-on that's got the wheels, and walk as much as you can while you're there. That gets that lymphatic system moving, and it just helps you generally feel so much better. And you can take another little nap after your layover and hit the ground ready to go.
Right. People who have blood pressure problems need to be aware that you're going to have fluid build up in your lower extremities if you don't move. And so that's very, very important to avoid swelling. Compression socks for those that have circulation issues is something they should definitely wear on the plane. It's extremely important that you are aware, that you talk to your doctor about extended air travel. Now, I've logged almost 2 million miles in international air travel, and only one time did I ever have feet swelling, and it was because I was between two keynote conferences, and I slept the whole trip. I didn't get up during the entire 8 hours, and so because of the lack of movement, I had some lower extremity, and that was in my 30s and 40s. So I can imagine
they say it
now.
Starts it, and that you should definitely get the socks by then. But it doesn't hurt to start early.
Right.
Take precautions. But I mean, it's not like they're expensive or anything. A couple of, under $10, and it helps you feel so much better. So they're definitely worth the investment.
Yeah, now I am a homeopathic person, so I actually take a product called No Jet Lag, which is arnica and some other. You can get it online or at any travel store. But I don't have issues with jet lag because my circadian clock is set by light. So I book all my trips to land in our final destination during the day, even if it's as late as 7 p.m. in May. That's still light for several more hours, so that you are landing not thinking that it's nighttime and that you should be asleep, but you definitely have some activity going on in that time. And of course, there's that trip through the airport to claim your bags and to do all those things. So you're going to be active before you get to the hotel. So there's things to do. A lot of people are concerned in advance about money. Israel is such a unique place in the fact that Israel is very much tied to the exchange rate, but for them to play the exchange rate game and not you. So they love American dollars, and they play the exchange rate and being able to convert those into shekels, so you don't have to. So how do you tell people about money?
Well, I tell them in an emergency, you use US dollars or your credit card. However, part of my cultural experience is getting them to actually spend shekels, because then every time they read about a shekel in the Bible, even though it's new Israeli shekel now, they have that connection to the land. So I like to reinforce that. So we've got two sides of the spectrum here. I love sitting down, like I'll bring change home each time. And so usually in our last team meeting, I'll bring my little change purse in, and we'll get them a chance to be familiar with the denominations, with the feel, with the look, because it definitely does not look like US dollars. Sometimes it feels a little bit like Monopoly money, which is fun because it makes it easier to spend on souvenirs, which then helps the Israeli culture or economy and all of that. And I get to bring fun things home, and so do my teams. But I I have a different way of offering them ways to exchange money. I don't recommend that they do it before they leave home because the exchange rate is horrible here. But ATMs in the land, or take cash or traveler's checks and exchange those at a money changer. Um, we'll look for good rates, but part of that is part of the experience on my little teams. And so we enjoy doing that.
It's interesting that someone just sent me. They'd gone through their parents had passed away, and they were cleaning out drawers, and they found an envelope filled with original Israeli shekels.
Wow.
So I have an envelope filled with old Israeli shekels before the new Israeli shekel came out, and I'll be giving that to my guide as a gift.
Oh, neat.
Because he's a antiquities collector, and these are in pretty good shape for being as old as they are. And although they are circulated, it's something that everybody who was there cashed theirs in for the new Israeli shekel. There's probably not as many around the old, so it's kind of something that I put away for him. Just to give.
Well, that's really neat.
Yeah.
I'd love to see those if you could send me a picture at some point.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
In the it's kind of interesting. I got a letter from a traveler, and they said they had an experience on a trip, and the experience is that their guide took them into a shopping facility, and the doors were closed, and drinks were brought out, and food was brought out, and they were kind of held, they felt captive in this shop and encouraged to buy at that shop. And they asked me if that was an ordinary thing, and I said it is a fairly ordinary thing for larger groups, that there are places where I take people that I've known the shopkeepers, that I only deal with licensed antiquity dealers. I only deal with people where I can pick up the phone and I can call and say, hey Mo, you shipped this $8,000 olive wood set and 2 pieces were broken, and Mo will say to me, no problem, Rabbi, let me pull the ticket and I'll send them the replacements, and it's done. If you're dealing with just general people and you don't have a relationship with them and you can't do that, and this is a 20-year relationship. I knew the founding father, I know the sons, I know the grandsons, and now I know the great-grandchildren that are now graduating high school and coming out of their IDF service and going to work in the business. So I've seen all the generations. We have a young man, Muhammad, that comes on the bus to sell sterling silver jewelry as you're at the Garden Tomb as your last opportunity to buy a souvenir for a very reasonable price. I think it's 3 sterling silver Star of Davids or Jerusalem Colossus for $20, something like that. Now, I've known Muhammad since he was 13 selling candy bars. Right?
Oh, wow.
And his father was a drummer at the YMCA, and his father died, and he was the oldest son, so he began selling candy bars. Well, he's now in his 30s, and he brought his children to meet me, and he brought his wife to meet me, and one of the things that there is in Israel, there are pickpockets, and there are places where tourists gather, and there are areas, and the Garden Tomb is very close to the bus terminal. You have to remember where it is. It's just on the other side. It's not that far from the bus terminal, which is where Golgotha is. If you kind of spin your map a little bit, you're going to see the proximity. You drive differently, but they're much closer than you actually think. And
and we're usually walking, so we're walking straight up through there.
Right, you're walking through there. So you walk up the pathway. You're going to encounter various people. Some are selling you counterfeit stuff. Some are, and there's also an area as you go out and turn right to where the buses park. At the top, there's also gatherings of many people. Well, Muhammad kind of clears the path for us. He's kind of the godfather. He's been working in that location for 22 years. So we have people that love the little shop there, and as they're exiting, they're way behind. The rest of the group's already on the bus, and they're way behind. And he personally escorts them all the way through to take them so that they're not accosted. They're not. Now, you say, well, you know, why would anybody be accosted? We're not talking about being taken hostage. We're talking about 4 people converging on you, wanting to sell you postcards. They know it's the garden tomb's often the last part of the trip. So they have one last occasion to kind of bombard you with postcards and bookmarks and Jerusalem bags and all these things. And what he does is when it's our group or other groups with our guide, he just tells them to scatter. There is one gentleman that I've known just as long, and I'm always at the front there at the garden tomb. We embrace, we kiss each other on each cheek, and people just look, and they look in wonder and say, who's the rabbi kissing? Who's this Muslim man that the rabbi's kissing on each cheek? And when Muhammad comes on the bus, they're watching this dynamic where I'm asking about his children. He's showing me a picture, or he brought his kids onto the bus and and introduced them and told them in Arabic that I was their uncle. So they came and they gave me a big hug. And so when you've known somebody for 20 years, you've seen them when they're a young teen. So 13 to 33, you've been there with them throughout their entire upbringing. This is a trusted friend. This is somebody. We have scarf merchants, family, 2 brothers, the cashmere scarves that they have 2 types. They have the tourist type, and then they have the preferred type. And the groups that come and don't really know and have a relationship, you're going to buy something that's pretty much imitation. Okay, for our group, you're going to get cashmere scarves at an incredible price, and he meets us at remote Rachel, and we have like an appointment together. And people ask all the time about these scarves because, you know, 3 or 4 scarves for $20 is a great, beautiful gift. It's a silk scarf. It's cashmere. It's high quality, and those are things we do. So the shopping part of it, which isn't important to me, but it's important to people that come there, this may be their only trip to Israel in their lifetime. The fact that you and I go so often makes us a little bit... It's
such a blessing, isn't it?
It is such a blessing. But, you know, I don't buy anything in it. There's, you know, this last trip I bought all items that would have my granddaughter's name on them in Hebrew. I had all my friends, I called them in advance and said, I want T-shirts made with Mila's name on it. I want jewelry made with her name on it. I want a little bracelet for her with her name. I want something for my daughter with. And so I sent emails out. And so they had them ready for me when I got there. And as you would imagine, they refused to take money from me. You know, because this is a blessing, because now I finally share my family. So what do they want? They wanted pictures. They wanted pictures. They wanted pictures. Who am I giving this to? And so there's that connection point. And so it's cultural, and it's not what the media portrays, is it? These relationships are deep, deep personal relationships of humanity. It's not this Arabs' lives matter or Muslims' lives matter. It's not that way.
People.
It's
people with lives intersecting as often as we can.
Absolutely. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Why don't you do me a favor and pray for Israel?
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, Father, in Jesus' name, I thank you for the land of Israel that you have set apart as holy, as an example to the world, as your spot, Lord, as a light to the nations, And Father, I ask that you would wash over the people and the land. Lord, that you would cleanse the land of this virus. Lord, all of the people that are suffering and coming down positive, Lord, would you strengthen their bodies? Would you cause their immune systems to rise up and fight against this virus? Lord, I ask that you would restore Israel. Lord, would you come in and restore all that the locusts have eaten, with the economy especially, all of the people who have had to postpone their trips and postpone their investment into your land. God, would you restore the finances? Lord, would you give the leadership in Israel, those kings of Israel, Lord, would you give them wisdom and understanding and discernment of the times and seasons? Would you cause them to do the right thing, to do the thing that will have them walking in your plan for the land at this time and this season? Lord, I ask that you would surround the people. Lord, those that are stuck inside and lonely, Lord, would you visit them? Would you give them dreams and visions, both Arabs and Jews and Christians? Lord, all three. Lord, would you come and make yourself known and manifest in their hearts and in their minds? Lord, I bless the land. I bless the people. In Jesus' name.
Amen and amen. Kim Frolander, RuthIsrael.org, embracing Israel, as we do here on this special edition on the second Friday of every month in the 10 o'clock hour of Embracing Israel. We look forward to seeing you next month, right back here, same time, same place. Visit her, get her books, read about Israel basics, learn about Israel, and check out her micro trips to Israel. If you can't join one of our large trips, which our next one is not until April the 3rd of 2022, that's open for registration even now at ignitingnation.com. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.